took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, gave her father 41.
Hello and welcome back to the Demon Den podcast. I am so excited to be back and recording again. I took a huge break. I know. Honestly, I feel like I've done that twice now. I have. Not I feel like I have. But we are back, okay? I recently broke my ankle, so I have been home with nothing to do, and I thought this was the perfect time to start my podcast, and it gives me a few weeks like where I'm not working and not doing anything else, where I could start a schedule and then hopefully be able to keep it up. So I'm excited. So we are going to do Lizzie Borden today. And the reason why I picked Lizzie Borden was because me and my friend have been talking about. Sorry if you could hear noises in the background. It's super loud out right now. I don't know why. Every loud truck in the world is like deciding to drive past my room right now. But me and my friend were talking about visiting the Lizzie Borden house. So I kind of realized I don't really know too much about Lizzie, or I didn't know too much about Lizzie Borden. So I wanted to go over her case. Obviously, everybody knows her as taking the axe and killing her parents. That nursery rhyme song that we all know, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her father 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her mother 41 or something like that. But aside from that, I didn't really know anything about the case. But now I do know things, and it's actually a lot more interesting than I thought. So I'm excited to share it with you guys. So before I get started with the story, I just want to make a disclaimer that this case is super popular. It's very well documented, but this did happen in the 1800s. So a lot of things could kind of get lost in translation throughout the years. And I listened to a few different podcasts on this, obviously did my research and read a lot of things, and there are little details here and there that may not match up everywhere you go. So bear with me if you hear anything that maybe you heard differently. That's just how it is with cases that are old. They're not like super little, like details are not always there. So anyway, enough with that. Let's get started on the case of Lizzie Borden. So Lizzie Andrew Borden was born in July 19th, 1860, making her a Cancer. I don't know too much about like the sign of Cancer, so let me know. I don't think I know anybody who is a Cancer, but she was born in Fall River, Massachusetts. Her parents were Andrew Jackson Borden, and then her biological mother's name was Sarah Anthony Morse Borden. So starting with Andrew Borden. So Lizzie grew up in a wealthy family. Her father, at the time of his death, was worth about $10 million in today's money. But he himself did not grow up wealthy. He actually grew up quite poor. So he started off by selling fish. Her mom was a housewife, but eventually he kind of put his foot into a bunch of different things. So he was like a carpenter at one point, an undertaker. He ventured into other businesses, including selling coffins and furniture. He had a textile business. He was in real estate. So he had a lot of different things going on that eventually he was able to create a very large amount of wealth for the Borden family. Now moving on to her biological mother, Sarah Borden. They got married in 1846, and soon after that, they began having children. So the first child they had was Lizzie's older sister, Emma Borden. Then they did have another baby named Alice, but unfortunately, she died before her second birthday. But then finally, they had Lizzie. So there's not much to say about her biological mother because unfortunately, Sarah passed away on March 26th, 1863, when she was just 39 years old, and Lizzie was only 3 years old at the time. So her mom died from uterine congestion and spinal disease. So at this point, Lizzie was 3, but Emma, her sister, was about 12. So she kind of stepped up as the mom figure and took care of Lizzie. So they became really close. However, 3 years later, in June of 1865, her father ended up remarrying a woman named Abby Durfee Gray. And at this point, Lizzie was about 5 years old. So she was described in some cases as like an evil stepmom, but a lot of sources say that she was not evil. She was actually very nice. She was very respectable. She took care of the kids. So that's kind of one of those details where like it's a little bit lost in translation. So I'm not really sure if she was actually like evil or mean or not, but I do know that Lizzie did not like her stepmother, which is maybe why she's kind of talked about as evil, but I don't know if she actually was. But even though Lizzie did not like her stepmother, but I feel like that's kind of normal. Like when a parent dies and then the other parent remarries or something, I feel like it's not common to hear that the one of the children kind of don't like the step parent. But let's talk a little bit about Lizzie. Growing up, Lizzie was just a regular kid. She was nice, she was sweet, she did well at school, and she actually knew how to speak fluent Chinese. That's just a little fun fact. But she was very active in church. She taught Sunday school and she was a part of a Christian women's society and just a bunch of different religious groups through the church. She did have a lot of friends and was very social and friendly with her group of friends, but she was said to be kind of shy to other people, like to people that she didn't know. But it kind of translated to people thinking she was bitchy. Like, she wasn't very open to talking to new people. If you were new and she didn't know you, she wasn't really interested in having a conversation, which I kind of get because I'm the same way. Like, I am probably this one of the sweetest people ever. Like, if you really know me and get to know me, but if I don't know you, I'm not gonna be mean to you, but I'm just gonna be very shy and kind of standoffish because that's just my personality because I have like social anxiety. So sometimes I feel like people think that I'm like bitchy and like I don't want to talk to them, and that's really not the case. I'm just like painfully shy. So that's kind of what I was understanding Lizzie was like. But yeah, so people kind of like thought that she was a little bitchy, but she did have a lot of friends on her own. But another thing about her, I guess on the bad side, if you'll say, is that she had a petty stealing habit. Like, she was known to steal items from the local stores. But since her father was wealthy and well known in the town, they kind of like I guess told him that that his daughter had been stealing stuff. So he kind of just said, "All right, whenever she steals something, just let me know and I'll pay for it later." So basically, the store owners would just let her steal and just call up dad and be like, "Hey, your daughter stole this, this, and this. Can you run us our money, please?" And he would. So to me, like, this was weird because they did have a lot of money, but I think this was Lizzie's way of getting attention and rebelling. And I honestly just think it was fun for her. I think she was just bored and that was like her little like fun hobby to do, which is crazy. But there's not much to do in the 1800s, I guess. At this time, like I said, Andrew Borden was worth about 10 million of today's dollars. So that kind of translates to like $300,000 at the time, which in the 1800s is obviously still a lot of money. But despite Andrew's wealth, he was very frugal and he chose to live a very simple life. They had a very simple home. He was always looking to save money, whether it be on food or utilities in the house. Like, they didn't have electricity, running water, or any type of plumbing for a while, if ever. And like, it wasn't abnormal at the time for homes to not have plumbing and electricity and stuff like that, but it was abnormal for them because they could afford it. He just didn't want to. Like, they were capable of having those things in the time period that it was. He just didn't want to spend the money on it. He dressed very obviously plain to the point people kind of thought it was odd how bad he dressed considering how much money he did have. Like, he would have really bad hats and his clothes would just look old and dirty. Like, you know how they say people with actual wealth don't dress fancy and they don't dress in designer, like they're plain clothed and stuff like that. Like, that was Andrew, but times 1,000. He was also extremely frugal in work. So it didn't just stay at home, it also translated to work. At one point, he was an undertaker and he was known to cut off the feet of dead bodies in order to fit them in smaller, cheaper caskets. Like, he was over the top cheap and like he did not play about growing and keeping his wealth. But his family, particularly Lizzie, did not like this. They all hated how cheap he was. They had cousins and friends who lived nearby in the hills, which I guess was the rich part of Fall River. They were also wealthy and they lived a totally different life. They had mansions, they threw fancy parties, and they just lived very luxuriously. And Lizzie would hang out with them all the time and see how much nicer they lived and would want that for herself. You have to realize also, Andrew grew up poor, so he was used to living in a frugal way, while Lizzie grew up wealthy, technically, because they did have a lot of money. She just didn't really get to see it, but she wanted to enjoy it. Meanwhile, Andrew didn't really care about that stuff. He wanted to just make sure that he made the money and kept the money. But despite all this, Lizzie was very close with her father growing up, but it did obviously change because in 1890 is when things started to change in the household, not right away, but over the next few years. So at this point, Lizzie had just come back from a few months in Europe. She went on a long European trip with some friends, and she was able to explore all around Europe and see how nicely people were living outside of Fall River. Obviously, she knew people were living nicely in Fall River, but now she was seeing the world. So when she came back, she was even more wanting to live in luxury, and she was even more feeling like she was missing out on things. But she got even more annoyed because her father started giving away real estate properties to some of Abby's family members. He gave Abby a house, but he allowed her to rent it to her sister, who was struggling at the time. And Lizzie did not like that. I guess she kind of thought it made it look like Abby was after her father's money, but also she didn't like that her father was playing around with the money that was eventually going to go to her. She felt like he was going to start using all of it on Abby and then she wouldn't get any money, which I don't know how that's possible. They had a lot of money. I don't think like giving her a house was going to do much, but that was what was going on in Lizzie's head. I feel like she also just didn't like seeing him spend the money on Abby and her family. Meanwhile, Lizzie wasn't really getting a lot, and they were living in squalor pretty much. Like she just didn't like seeing him give anybody anything. But after that, like after he gave Abby that house to rent out to her sister, Lizzie and her sister told their dad that they wanted a house that they could also rent out so they could make some money. So he ended up giving them a house for $1, but they ended up selling it back to him for $5,000 once they realized like the landlord life wasn't for them. Basically, all the money they made always went back into the property and taking care of the property, and they didn't like that. Like, they just wanted to make the money. They weren't interested in the business side of it, so they ended up just giving it right on back. This whole money situation was starting to make things weird in the family. In 1891, the Borden house got robbed, which led to her father starting to put more locks in the house. Now, the way the Borden house was set up, it was kind of like a big maze, I guess. It was originally meant to be a two-family house, but Andrew bought it just for their one family. But instead of renovating it to kind of make it more suitable for them to live in, he just added small necessary things like stairs. So there weren't a lot of hallways and whatnot leading to the rooms. One room kind of just led to another. So like you would have to go through, say, Lizzie's room to get to the kitchen, to get to Emma's room. A lot of the doors had the same key to open each room, but the only room that did not have the same key was Andrew and Abby's room. So it had a separate key, but it wasn't hidden. It was hanging there in plain sight. But if you didn't live in the house, like you wouldn't know what that key unlocked. But this is an important detail because during the robbery, only things from Abby and Andrew's room were stolen. So this means someone had to know where the key was to unlock the door, and they also had to know that that specific key was the one that unlocked the door. Obviously, like I said, the key was in plain sight, so a robber could have seen it and just tried each door until it worked. But Andrew was kind of thinking that maybe the robbery was done by somebody in the house. One more thing happened in May of 1892 that was kind of a big deal. It involved pigeons that Lizzie had as pets. They had a barn on the property, and there were a bunch of pigeons in there that Lizzie would take care of. But one day she went to find them all dead at the hands of her father, who had taken a hatchet and killed all of them one by one. He said it was because he felt the pigeons were encouraging people to come onto the property in the barn, and it was just attracting too much attention from the neighborhood boys. And honestly, I don't know what the fuck that was about. It sounded like a manic episode to me. I'm not gonna lie, like that's the vibes I got, because he really had no reason to just go kill every single one of his daughter's birds, especially since he knew that she loved and cared for them so much. Like, it's pretty much like the equivalent of your dad just coming in and chopping off your dog's head one day because it was attracting too much attention all of a sudden. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. But at this point, a couple of years had passed by and tensions were a bit higher in the Borden house, obviously. So Lizzie started to kind of pull away from her family. She stopped really talking to them much. She stopped eating meals with them, and overall she just started to keep her distance. She used to call Abby Mom, but now she just started calling her Miss Borden. Lizzie was even starting to kind of distance herself from her sister Emma, who she was very close with, but both of them decided in July of 1892 to get away for a bit and travel around Massachusetts just for the month, returning in August. However, after the trip, Lizzie did not return to the house right away. She stayed at a guest house somewhere else in Fall River, Massachusetts, which is where the Borden house was. But she did end up eventually returning to the Borden household on August 3rd, 1892. Her sister Emma, however, did not return yet. She was still traveling around the area a little bit. But on the day that she returned, she had told her friend Alice that she was worried for Andrew and Abby because they, along with the whole house, including her Uncle John, who had just been visiting, hadn't been feeling well. It seemed like they may have had food poisoning from a pot of soup that their maid Bridget had been serving the family for a few days. Side note, their maid's name was Bridget, and I'm going to call her Bridget, but Lizzie and her sister Emma called her Maggie because their childhood maid's name was Maggie, and they just like couldn't be bothered to learn Bridget's name, I guess, so they just continued on calling her Maggie, which is crazy. Like, you could see the kind of girls they were just from that, but I'm going to call her Bridget. Anyway, knowing what we know now, people do speculate that the soup may or may not have been poisoned, but there is no proof of that, but the timing just seems a little bit odd. The soup was sitting out all week on the counter, just getting reheated, so like when they would want to eat it again, they would just heat it up and then they would just keep it right there on the counter, no refrigeration, no nothing, and there was mutton meat in it, so that does obviously make people sick, but at the time, in this time period, or especially in their household, that's what they did. Like, they were used to leaving the food out. That's what they did for all their food. So I just feel like at some point your body gets used to that, and I don't feel like that they would be getting as sick as they were from that, since they had been always doing it and they really didn't have problems with that all the time. But I don't know, Andrew and Abby did kind of suspect at one point that they might have been poisoned, and they did go to the doctor and ask him about it, but they kind of got dismissed and they were just told, like, it's probably the soup that you're eating, like, throw away the soup, stop eating soup that's been sitting out. So it was never really looked upon any more than what it was, but there were suspicions. Anyway, back to Lizzie. Lizzie was telling her friend Alice that she was worried about something happening, which is weird. Now again, knowing what we know now, she could have been saying that because she had planned to harm Abby and Andrew, but we don't really know. Andrew did not have the best reputation in the town. Like, he wasn't a fair boss. If he was going to give his employees a raise, he would also raise the rent for them. And remember, he owned a lot of real estate properties, so most of the time, his employees were living on one of his properties. So basically, any raise he gave them, he would just pocket it right back up. So I don't know if that's enough to murder somebody, but it is important to note when you're thinking of who could have disliked the Borden family. He also just wasn't generally a friendly guy. Like, he wasn't the man you're going to wave at if you pass on the street. He wasn't like the friendly neighbor that you're going to go next door to borrow some sugar from, you know? Like, he just wasn't that type of dude. But I don't know. I just don't feel like that is enough for somebody to kill him, but that's just my opinion. Moving on. We're going to go now to August 4th, 1892. At this time, Lizzie was 32 years old. The morning started with Andrew, Abby, and their Uncle John, who again had just come to visit them. They were having breakfast, which was the same soup that they had been eating all week that was making them sick. Lizzie did not have any of this soup during the week, and she did not join them for breakfast this morning because, as I said earlier, she had stopped eating with them in general, and her sister Emma was not at the home. She was still out and about traveling with friends. So at around 8:48 a.m., their Uncle John had gone out in the town to take care of some things, and then her father left soon after to go for a walk. Finally, around 9 a.m., I think, Lizzie came down to eat some breakfast in the dining area. She did not have the soup still at this point. She had cookies and coffee. So while she was eating, Abby was upstairs tidying the guest room where Uncle John was staying. And then after Bridget finished serving Lizzie and cleaning up, she went to lay down for a quick little nap because she also wasn't feeling well because she had also eaten the soup. Lizzie was the one who suggested to her that she should go take a nap because she wasn't feeling well. But Bridget did end up waking up from this nap, and Abby asked her to go downstairs to clean all the windows inside of the house and outside of the house. People in the town supported this alibi. They saw her cleaning, and she even chatted with the neighbor's maid at one point. So around the time, she was either outside cleaning the outdoor windows or just inside cleaning the inside windows when Abby was being murdered in the house. However, Bridget claims she didn't hear anything. Some people think she was covering for Lizzie because, like, how do you not hear murder happening just inside the house, especially if she was inside the house? But it isn't clear if she was cleaning an indoor or outdoor window at the time. I read her testimony, and she said she was walking to and from the barn to get water and just like all around the outside, inside of the house, getting these windows clean. So she was all over the place. Also, she wasn't really feeling well, and so she was probably like a little bit out of it, like going through the motions. So I don't know. So you don't really know if she was covering. Her and Lizzie weren't really close. Like Lizzie didn't even call her by her name. So I don't know why she would cover for her. But again, we don't know the details on that. But she did say she didn't see anybody coming in or out of the house, and nothing suspicious was going on. So again, she was both inside and out. So if a random person just came in, I'm sure she would have seen it. But after she was finished cleaning, she didn't go look for Abby. She didn't really have a reason to, so she didn't know that she was dead. Lizzie did ask Bridget, though, if she was going out, which Bridget replied, I may or may not. I'm not feeling well. Then Lizzie told her if she did go out to be sure to lock the doors because Miss Borden went out to visit a sick friend and Lizzie herself might go out too, which we learned that this was not true because Miss Borden was upstairs dead at the time. So this seems like Lizzie was trying her best to cover up what she had done. But at this time, it's now 10:30 a.m. Andrew Borden came home as well, and he went to take a nap on the couch in the living room. But we know he came home at this time because he was having trouble with his key and getting inside, so Bridget had to come open the door for him. She was having trouble opening the door as well, and I guess she said something that caused Lizzie to giggle upstairs. Bridget heard her. This is important to note because again, at this time, Abby was already dead upstairs in the guest room. If Lizzie was upstairs at the time, she would have seen her dead body right there because it was in clear sight of the hallway. Lizzie also claimed later on that she was not upstairs at all, which is a lie because according to Bridget, she heard her upstairs. So after Bridget opened the door for Andrew, she finished up her cleaning and then she went to her room to rest again. So to paint the picture at this point, Lizzie is somewhere in the house or the barn. I don't really know. Her story changed so much. We don't know for sure where she was, but she was on the property somewhere. And according to Bridget, she heard her laughing upstairs. So she might have been upstairs. We don't know, but we do know she's on the property. We know Abby is in the guest room dead. Bridget is now back in her room resting, and Andrew is on the couch sleeping. 40 minutes after this, around 11:10 a.m., Bridget, the housekeeper, gets woken up by Lizzie screaming, and she's screaming, Maggie, remember she called her Maggie, Maggie, come quick, father's dead, someone came in and killed him. Bridget comes down, but Lizzie won't let her go into the living room where her father's dead body is at first. She instructed her to go get the family doctor, Dr. Bowen. Immediately upon seeing Andrew's body, the doctor knew he was clearly dead. I don't think this was a job for the family doctor, honestly. I think that the police should have been called first, but that's besides the point. Anyway, Andrew was bludgeoned to death on the couch. He had been hit in the head and face and body with the hatchet 11 times. It was so bad that one of his eyeballs were literally cut in two, and his body was still bleeding out and warm at this point, which means this just happened, which we obviously knew because he literally had just gone down for a nap not too long ago. At this point, though, they're wondering, where is Abby? If she was in the house, she would have heard all the commotion going on, so the fact that she wasn't down in the living room made them question now where she was. At first, Lizzie said she didn't know, and she continued with that story that she thought she went out to visit a sick friend. But then she said, oh, I think I heard her come home. She's probably upstairs. So Bridget ends up going upstairs to look. And Abby was indeed found upstairs, and she was in worse condition than Andrew was. She was found laying down in a pool of her own blood with 19 blows to her head, and her injuries made it look like she was looking at her attacker at some point. So she had one blow to the back of her head, and then the rest were to her face, as though she might have turned to look at who was attacking her. So if it was Lizzie, she would have known at the time of her death. It's also noted that her blood was dry and coagulated, confirming she was dead for longer than Andrew, which we already knew. Both Andrew and Abby were totally overkilled with significant force, and it was clear that whoever committed these murders were extremely angry. If you want to see these crime scene photos, you can actually see them on Google, warning you that they are pretty graphic and unsettling, but they do show you how brutal these murders were. Police were called to the house to investigate, and they assumed at first it was an outsider who had come into the house and murdered Andrew and Abby. However, amid the investigation, they found out that none of the neighbors or anyone in town saw or heard anything suspicious or saw any random people hanging out in the area. However, honestly, the police were not even around. They had a yearly police party event that the entire police squad was at. It even took them a minute to get to the Borden house because they were all at this party. And what's interesting to me was that everyone in town knew about this event. It was a very well-known thing that it was happening on that day. So it's just quite the coincidence that the day the police were all out, this murder happened. The police should never, obviously, just be all out at once, especially if the community knows that they're all going to be out. But regardless, it was a coincidence. I mean, I think anybody would probably take that chance to commit a crime. But anyway, there were no leads pointing outside of the house. Eventually, they directed the investigation to whoever was inside the house at the time of the murders. With Abby and Andrew now gone, the only suspects were Lizzie and Bridget. Obviously, Bridget said she was cleaning and then taking a nap, which her alibi was pretty solid. Lizzie, though, said she was in the pigeon barn eating pears or looking for something. I don't know. Honestly, her story was all over the place and would change all the time. Like, she would literally say 1 minute she was somewhere, the next minute it was another story. Or she would say 1 minute she heard something, and then at one point she didn't hear anything. So she was not clear on what she was doing because she was not doing whatever she was lying about because she was killing her parents. Anyway, it was also noted that the police said Lizzie was extremely calm during this. She was not crying. There was no distraught. She was very just calm talking to the police. And obviously people grieve in different ways, so you can't automatically look at that and be like, oh, she's a murderer. But knowing what we know now, it's probably because she was the murderer. So it makes it even more eerie, obviously. But the police went on to search the house and found a few hatchets, but one of them particularly they noted was broken, so it was just the head of it. And they kind of thought that this was the hatchet used to kill Abby and Andrew. And the way that it was placed looked like someone put it there and tried to make it look like it was untouched. Like they purposely put dust or dirt or ash or something on it. But they didn't collect that at the time, nor did they take the dress that Lizzie was wearing that had a little bit of blood on it because she claimed that it was just period blood. Also, there was a bunch of what looked like bloody clots in a bucket, and she claimed they were soaked in blood because of her period. And they just didn't check it. They just believed her. I guess, period was a sensitive topic for men, so they literally just left it alone, and they were like, okay, you have blood on you, you have blood in a bucket, these people are dead with blood everywhere, we're going to take your word for it. We're not going to take it. We're not going to check it. We're not going to take the weapon either. We'll just leave it there for overnight. That's literally what they did, and that's fucking crazy to me. It just makes no sense. But they also did an autopsy on Andrew and Abby. They did not find any poison, but the autopsy was done right then and there in the living room. And technology wasn't advanced at all, so obviously this could not be super accurate, but there is no other proof. It just comes, unfortunately, with the time period. It was not easy to conduct a thorough investigation with lack of technology, and also the detectives clearly lacked common sense, so it was even harder. But it was later found out, just before the murders, Lizzie tried to get prussic acid, which is cyanide, from the family doctor for quote-unquote preserving her sealskin coats, to which the doctor was no, you don't need something like that. I'm not giving that to you. But it brings the question of, was she wanting that so she could poison them? I think so. But did she try to use something else to poison them that she could get her hands on? Maybe it wasn't as strong, so she put it in the family soup and it wasn't enough to kill them, or it wasn't enough to show up in whatever autopsy they did. But again, what even did this autopsy consist of? They did it in the living... I don't know, but there's so many unanswered questions that in today's day and age probably wouldn't be unanswered because of technology. So that's what kind of sucks about this time period as far as investigation goes. But anyway, after the half-assed initial investigation, Lizzie's friend Alice, Bridget, and John were able to stay in the house overnight after the investigation. That would totally not happen in today's day and age. Obviously, it would be considered an active crime scene, and you absolutely would not be able to continue living in the house for that time. It was a different time, which is why I can't always trust the findings and conclusions they come to, because things were just not done the same way that they're done now. I just think it's insane that you let people stay in especially if you don't know if someone in the house committed the murder, and you just let them stay in there. That's insane to me, no matter what the time period is. That should have just been obvious. But there was an officer who was set up outside that night, I guess to watch over the house, but he claimed that he saw Lizzie go into the basement with Alice holding a mop and a lamp. And he didn't investigate it further. So I don't really know what his point of being in front of the house was if he wasn't gonna go investigate any suspicious activity. But he saw Lizzie leaning over a sink, which I don't know how I feel about, because you're sitting in front of the house. Why wouldn't you go and investigate that? Anything suspicious, why would you, if you knew enough to mention that it's suspicious, why wouldn't you go intervene? And, like, you can't put it past somebody. If you're leaving, especially if you're leaving a murderer in a house, of course they're going to sit there and conceal whatever they can. Like, that's a murderer's fucking dream, to be able to go and have free reign to clean up the crime scene. Like, I don't understand. Like, technology advancements or not, that is simple common sense. So I'm not really sure what the thought process there was. But by the next day, everyone in town had heard what had happened and were crowded around the Borden house. The police came at this point to continue the investigation. This time, they finally checked Lizzie and Emma's clothes. Emma had returned home after getting a telegram about what happened, but at this point is when they finally took the hatchet they had found the day before, which at this point, again, you left it there overnight. Why? What is the point of not taking it the day before? Why leave the evidence in the house when you don't even know who committed the crime yet? Like, anybody can go back. I just get so annoyed about that. Like, it's just crazy to me. But Alice, Lizzie's friend who was there the night before, like I said, claimed that she saw Lizzie burning a brown stained dress on the kitchen stove. And when she asked Lizzie what the stains were, Lizzie said it was just paint, which obviously sounds like bullshit. Because even if it was just paint, why are you so worried about burning a dress with paint right now after everything that's going on? Like, that's what you're doing? Obviously, it probably wasn't paint, though. But at this point, Lizzie was deemed officially a suspect in the murder of Andrew and Abby Borden. The prime suspect, actually. Judge Josiah Blaisdell held an inquest at the police station, which is basically just a more formal continuation of the investigation. He had Lizzie come in to interview and give some more official statements as to what happened, but she came in high as hell. Like, she was completely cracked out because she had been prescribed morphine to calm her down because of this whole situation. This was also a private inquest, so she couldn't have her family's attorney in there, which, again, in today's day and age, correct me if I'm wrong, would not fly. Like, if you ask for your attorney, the whole thing would be thrown out if they did not let you have your attorney present. But again, the times were different. But honestly, this was super bad for her because her interview was a fucking mess. She continuously contradicted herself. Her story was not straight. She would mess up big details like where she was at the time of the murder. She was constantly changing the story and forgetting what she had said a few minutes prior. She was even refusing to answer questions that would have helped her. And it all just did not make her look good. At the end of the day, everyone like Bridget, her Uncle John, her sister Emma, all had alibis that checked out and stories that remained consistent, and Lizzie was the only one who could not verify what she was doing at the time of the murders and who didn't have a straight story. Even Bridget would say things like when and where she saw Lizzie, and Lizzie's stories did not match Bridget's at all. At this point, police truly believed she was the murderer, so on August 11th, 1892, Lizzie Borden was arrested on 3 counts of murder, 1 for Andrew, 1 for Abby, and then 1 more charge for the pair of murders. At Lizzie's preliminary hearing, Judge Josiah Blaisdell held Lizzie for the murder because, this is a direct quote, she was probably guilty due to her inconsistent alibis and stories and lack of other reasonable suspects. So she was put in Taunton Jail in Massachusetts, making her the first woman ever to be put in that jail for murder at the time, for that crime. This case obviously grew national attention for the brutality of the crime, but also for it to be done at the hands of the victim's own daughter. That was wild for the time period. Like, it's always tragic to hear, but back then you didn't hear about this as much as you unfortunately do now. And especially it being a woman, that was pretty rare at the time as well, or at least it was not super documented at the time. So everybody was talking about this all over the world. It was highly publicized and reported. So this came with a lot of false media created stories as to why Lizzie may have committed this murder. There were stories on Lizzie being a lesbian, having sexual relationships with the maid, that Abby may have walked in on one day, which caused her to murder them. Another story was that she killed them in an epileptic fit, or that she was protecting her sister from sexual abuse from her father, but none of those theories ended up checking out. At one point, though, this is interesting, is that another woman named Bertha Manchester, who also lived in Fall River, Massachusetts, was actually murdered on her father's farm in a similar fashion, except instead of a hatchet, it was an axe that was used to kill her. So people thought, like, okay, Lizzie's in jail. So this obviously wasn't her, so there must be somebody else going around killing people with axes and hatchets. However, eventually it was found out that a man named Jose Carrera de Mello was responsible for that murder, and he was not in the area of Fall River at the time of the Borden murders. So Lizzie now was officially put on trial for the murders of her parents. Her trial began June 5th, 1893, and there's a lot of conflicting stories on how the trial went, but to make a long story short, there was no solid evidence of anything that led the jury to believe Lizzie was guilty without reasonable doubt. They did find the hatchet that they put into evidence, but there was no proof that that was the one used to kill them. This was the 1800s, there was no DNA testing at the time, and there was no visible blood on the hatchet. They didn't even collect it until the next day, so it could have been cleaned. She could have used it the day to kill her parents and wiped it on her dress, wiped off all the blood, and, that is as good as new to them because there was no blood in it to test, or there was no blood in it to see, and they couldn't test it, so it was good. As long as it was clean, it was good. Her alibi was not confirmed, but it also wasn't denied. Like, they couldn't really prove that she wasn't where she was saying she was, and they couldn't prove that she was. And then all the evidence presented, like Alice seeing her burn the dress, was all considered circumstantial. Like, there was nothing solid, no aha moment, no aha piece of evidence. There was nothing they could legally use. But one interesting part of the trial is there was a point that they took out the skull of Abby and Andrew. Somebody had boiled their heads down to reveal just the skull to show the hatchet marks, to show how deep the marks were. And this made Lizzie faint. So that was a pretty big deal, but one of the main defenses by the lawyers was essentially that she couldn't have done it because the murder was so brutal. It could not have been done by a woman. Like, it just had to be a man who did it, which we know is bullshit. Women are absolutely capable of doing that. But anyway, because of the lack of evidence, the jury, which consisted of a bunch of farmers and businessmen in the area, took just 90 minutes on June 20th, 1893 to find Lizzie Borden not guilty of the murders of Andrew and Abby Borden. And when she heard that news, she almost fainted again. So in total, she only ended up spending about 9 to 10 months in jail for the murders. As Lizzie left the courthouse, she said that she was the happiest woman in the world. And honestly, she was probably even happier because her and her sister Emma inherited not only Andrew's money, but also Abby's money. Because since Abby technically was killed first and died first, all of her money went to him. And then in turn, all of Andrew's assets and money went to his daughters. Andrew Borden was worth about $350,000 with all of his assets, so Lizzie and her sister ended up getting about $25,000 each, which in today's world was about $8.5 million each that they got. So now Lizzie could finally live the luxurious life that she wanted to. And that's what she did. She ended up changing her name to Lizbeth Borden, which is like not a dramatic change. Like, you would think that she would want to change it to be unrecognizable, but at the same time, she ended up also staying in Fall River, so it really wouldn't have mattered anyway. But she purchased a huge mansion with her sister Emma with all the things they ever wanted, like plumbing, they had maids, they had cars, and she lived her life shopping, traveling, partying, living in luxury like she always wanted. She was looked down upon in the community at this point. She was not fully accepted back into the community because many people believed that she killed her parents, because she did kill her parents. But people would stare at her, obviously. People wouldn't speak with her. People would prank her and talk about her. Kids would go to her house and stand in front of her house and sing that nursery rhyme. Like, they would just stand there and taunt her. So it wasn't all fun and games for her, but she was okay with it because she stayed in the Fall River and she dealt with it. Eventually, her and her sister Emma, though, had a falling out because Emma did not like the way Lizzie was living. She was partying a lot. She was hanging out with the wrong people, particularly an actress named Nance O'Neill. She was not fond of their friendship, I guess. So her sister moved away and they never spoke again. And I can't find any further info on that. So I don't know if there's more to that story. It just doesn't sound right. I feel like something else may have happened, because to never speak again because she didn't like a friend of hers or she didn't like her partying habits, I just feel like there may have been more to that, but no one ever spoke about it, so we will never know. But Lizzie never got married. She never publicly spoke about the murders again, and she ended up just living her life in Fall River until she died on June 1st, 1927 at the age of 66 from pneumonia. And she was buried with her family that she murdered. How respectful. Her sister coincidentally died 9 days later from kidney issues, but nobody was ever charged with the murders of Andrew and Abby Borden. You can imagine why, because they let the person who did do it go. So, of course, nobody else was ever convicted. In my opinion, if you can't tell, I believe Lizzie did kill her parents because her story kept changing. Number one, if you didn't do something and you have an alibi, it's not going to change. Like, it's going to remain consistent. And aside from that, there was just no other reason or motive for anybody else to do this. Like, there was no robbery, nothing was taken. Like, nobody got anything out of killing these people, especially Abby. Like, nobody hated her. Like, she was cool. Like, someone could say maybe Andrew, the people didn't like him in the town. But there was no reason to kill both of them. Nobody had a reason except for Lizzie, who got the money and got all this stuff from their death. Like, I think maybe Lizzie had some mental health issues. Like, maybe she had a couple screws loose. She didn't like her stepmom, so that was whatever. She started disliking her dad. Greed and wanting money, I think, played a huge role in this, if it wasn't the main motivator. So I think it's pretty obvious. There's so much evidence that today she probably would have been convicted. Like, if they had the DNA testing and all the things that they have today, the technology, I think it would be a lot different for her. But luckily for her, they didn't have that, so she got away with it. But people do have theories that it wasn't her. So let me know what you guys think. I heard that some people think that her Uncle John either did it or at least helped her, because when he was interviewed, he kind of remembered a little too many details about where he was that day. Like, he remembered the street numbers from places he was at. I think at one point he took the train that day and he remembered the numbers on the conductor's hat. Like, just such little details, it's almost like it was rehearsed. You know what I'm saying? Some of the family members even thought that he was involved as well, but there was never any proof. He was never, like, publicly tried or anything for it. So, I don't know. I really don't know. I didn't really look too much into that theory, but some people do believe that. But let me know if you guys have any theories. And let me know if you guys have ever been to the Borden house. It is a bed and breakfast in Fall River, Massachusetts right now, and you could stay there. You could stay in a room. You can investigate. I think they have tours and stuff like that. So me and my friend want to go there. Let me know if you guys have ever gone there, how it was. And thank you guys for listening. I'm so excited to be back. I think my next episode I'm going to have a special guest, so that's exciting. And yeah, thank you guys for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.